Great. All right. Today I want to share my impressions with you guys of this book, The Mars Room by Rachel Kushner. Well, I liked this book for several reasons. I think the most important one is that it shows or it talks about people who are in prison, and it talks about how they manage to create their own freedom in there. And they find the freedom, or they create their own freedom in the little things of life that they do in their everyday life. They have very little freedom or none at all, but they come up with ways to go around the situation they're in. They create this thing called PRUNO, which is they steal fruit from the cafeteria and manage to make their own wine. I didn't even know this word PRUNO. And this is another thing that I liked about this book, because for me, fiction is not just about getting entertainment and having fun and enjoying the story itself, but it's a way to learn and about culture. I like when the author includes real life things into their books. And Pruno, for example, is something I had never heard of. I mean, I imagine people make wine in prison, but I didn't know it had a name and that it's called Pruno, and that it played such a big role in their lives. And the author is very good. It describes the Rachel Kushner is very good. She describes the way it smells. It's very graphic, but because she did a lot of field work, so she knows what she's talking about. Anyway, I'm gonna try not to give you too many spoilers, but that's one thing. And well, she includes a lot of things about American culture in her book. And American culture, we hear a lot about it, we see movies, we listen to songs, so we think we know a lot about American culture. But, I'm always surprised of how little we know and how much I learn every time I come across things like the things that I read in this book. For example, she talks about a group of people called the Juggalos, Juggalo, and they're fans of a certain rap group, and they embody white trash. I hope nobody gets offended by this, but if you I looked up Juggalos, and they emphasize the fact that they don't have to. You don't have to. You just have to be spontaneous, But it's funny. But they paint their faces white, and I don't know. I had never heard of them, so I was very surprised when I looked up Juggalos and found out about them. Also, another thing that made me, but the thing that made me buy this book and read it is the image that was published in a local newspaper here in Brazil, Folha de São Paulo, where the author, Rachel Kushner, the newspaper published a photo of her in front of her Ford Galaxy. It's a classic car, and I like classic cars. And of course, it made me want to read that book. And she includes classic cars. There's a character in the book, transsexual character, really, and she or he, because anyway, well, you read the book. Talks extensively about different cars, which made me want to look up. And it's interesting. Reading in the era of Google is interesting because you can Google everything and look. And I saw this car, different cars they were talking about, and it's interesting because you learn. The story is just one thing, a part of my interest in reading contemporary novels. The main draw is for me is to learn really from the author, about the culture, the very particular details of a person's life, and her enjoyment of country music and cars was very important in my enjoyment of her book. And I mentioned country music. She talks very particularly about bluegrass and some artists that I had never heard of and I came to know through this book. Most importantly, David Stringbean Aikman. She mentions David Stringbean Aikman. She describes him as a man who wears who wore t-shirt wore shirts down to his thighs and very short pants starting at his thighs. So it's difficult to imagine, but he was very tall, and the way he dressed made him look even taller, with a very long torso and short legs. And he played funny bluegrass songs on his banjo. And I looked him up, of course, and he was very funny and very interesting. And well, after I had looked him up, enjoyed his music, enjoyed his persona, then, well, I'm not going to tell you what, well, this is history. He was killed, okay? But before I learned, when I was looking him up, I learned that he was killed. And then she goes on to talk about his murder later on in the book, a few chapters later. And this she does this, and she mentions many other artists that I looked up and that I listened to for the first time. She introduced me to these new artists. And well, but why does she mention David Stringbean Aikman like that? Well, just to highlight the fact that country music is very contradictory and has two sides to it. It's funny and happy, it can be funny and happy, and well, and is pervaded by these supposedly Christian values of I don't know, loyalty, positive values, But the lyrics of a lot of songs have to do with a lot of violence and murders, much like the one the murder of David Stringman Aikman, because Stringbean Aikman, because he was violently murdered. A person that you look at him, you can't help but like him when you see him. He's so funny. His teeth are funny. He plays in a funny, happy way. Well, he was murdered, and this resonated with me because I like country music and bluegrass. And there's a song by this guy, Johnny Paycheck, that I listened for the first time only a short time ago. And my favorite song by him is a song where he's telling another person. The name of the song is "Pardon Me, I Got Someone to Kill." So he's telling a person that he's going to leave their drinking buddies. He says, "Oh, hey, I have to go now because I'm gonna kill my wife, my her lover, and then I'm gonna kill myself." And well, no need to call the sheriff, because by the time the sheriff gets to their house, to this guy's house where my wife is, we will all be dead. And I've thought it through. I'm leaving you a note here telling. I'm gonna leave a note there telling people what I did and why I did it. So it's very dark, but you see, it's country music, and it's interesting. It's not an ugly song. It's a fun. If you listen just to the song, you enjoy it. It's a nice song, but with very, very dark lyrics. And I think, well, it's interesting in a way, right? And this is in the book. The book is a lot like that. It's very dark sometimes, very funny sometimes. Anyway, so another thing I liked about the movie was, well, it covers very hot topics like stalking and violence against women. What else? I think this is important. Before I finish the video, I have to talk about Redwood Trees, because I've been to America. I went there once, and first of all, I went to Florida after all, but in the end. But initially, I wanted to go to California. Again, the story is set in California. Well, I didn't tell you much about the story after all. Well, the story is set in a real prison that exists. Apparently, the largest woman prison facility in America, And America is a place with a lot of prisons and a lot of prisoners. And it's in California, in the mountains, or near the mountains. And that's where this story is set. And what else? And at a certain point in the novel, the writer, the main character, her name is Romy Hall. She goes to a redwood tree forest, and she describes the redwood trees, these huge trees, very tall. Apparently, from up close, they look like walls. And she described them in a very interesting way, and it just made me want to go there more. And hopefully one day I'll do that. So this is my review for the Mars Room, and I found out that I didn't tell you much about the story. Well, maybe you'll have to read it. Okay, you can read the story on Wikipedia, the plot on Wikipedia, and well, this way at least I know I didn't give you many spoilers. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and have a good one.